but they make the scapegoat guilty. So when he said he's a blasphemer, they're talking about man. They were accusing Messiah of making himself like God, but he was God. That's man's sin. It's man who made himself like God. It goes all the way back to the Eden. What did the serpent say? You shall become as God. Why did they take that fruit? Because you shall become as God. Now, man is accusing God. He is putting his sin of blasphemy onto God, the scapegoat. He declares him guilty. What? Guilty of death. It's not God. It's man who's guilty of death. But now Messiah is going to bear that on himself, and that's why he's going to die. Matthew 26, verse 67. They spit in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hand. In Mark 14:65 says, and some began to spit at him to cover his face. They beat him, and they said, prophesy to us, Messiah. Notice something. Later on, after that, it says that the servants came and the others came, but at the beginning, it doesn't say. At the beginning, it says they did it. Who did it? The priests did it. The ones who started doing it were the priests. What did the priests have to do? The priests had to touch the head of the sacrifice. So now they touch his head in hatred, but they still do it. Their sins are symbolically transferred to the scapegoat. But he's not just going to die for the sins of Israel. He's going to die for the sins of everybody. So they deliver him over to the Gentiles, to the nations, to those who represent everybody else, Rome, the universal kingdom. And there before Rome, they declare him guilty of something else, not a blasphemy. They declare him guilty of treason because he made himself to be king over the true king, Caesar. So what do? So this is the second confession of sin over the scapegoat. Now it's the nations, the Gentiles, it's all man. And what is it? It wasn't his sin. It was Rome's sin. It was man's sin because man was guilty of treason because it's man who made himself king against the true king. It's man who walks around as king against the true king. Even Rome, the whole world does. They were putting the sin of man in their own way. They didn't know about it. Onto the scapegoat, so he took it. Yom Kippur. Verse 17, then of Matthew 27, the soldiers of the governor took Yeshua into the common hall. The whole band of the soldiers gathered around him. They struck him where? On the head. They too touched the scapegoat as he has to be touched on the head. The sins of man come on him. On Yom Kippur, when the scapegoat was chosen, a scarlet thread, a scarlet cloth actually was placed around the scapegoat. To symbolize that he's bearing the sins now. Scarlet was the color of sin. The Roman soldiers stripped him and they put on him a robe of scarlet, the color of the scapegoat. That your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. The color of sin, scarlet is red, but red is something, there's something else here too. You know what red is in Hebrew? Edom. The word Edom or Adam. The word Adam means red because he was from the red earth. And so he puts on, he is bearing the sins of Adam, the sin of man. God in the creation made man the king of all his works on earth. Now they put on him a robe of scarlet and they weave a crown of thorns. They put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand, and they bow their knees before him and mock him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. God set man as king of his works. Now man makes God the king of his works, the king of sin. God made man in his image, holy. Man now takes God and makes him into man's image, sin. And a mockery, a king, an imposter. The sins of the nation on Yom Kippur are placed on the scapegoat. Now they are placed on the head of the scapegoat. Now they place a crown of thorns on the head of the scapegoat. When man was driven out of the garden, he went out with a curse. Cursed is the earth, the ground, because of you, Adam. Cursed because of you, it shall bear now thorns and thistles it shall bear. the symbol of the curse was thorns. Now the thorns of the curse are woven into a crown and put on the head of this scapegoat. He is now to bear the sins of man and the curse of man. God made man the king of his blessings. Now man makes God the king of his curse. God becomes the king of the curse. On that day that sin began, man was judged guilty, sent out of the garden to die. Now God is judged guilty. He's led away to be killed. We saw the mystery on Friday. Man journeys away from God, from Eden. On Yom Kippur, the high priest journeys back to God. But at the gate of Eden, as man is driven out, are stationed the cherubim, guarding the way to the tree of life. So at the gates, the doorways, the entrance and exits of the tabernacle and then the temple are stationed the cherubim, in carving, in wood, in cloth, guarding the way back to God. Whoever would seek to go back to God, to go back to paradise, has to come face to face with the cherubim. The high priest on the day of Yom Kippur had to enter in through the cherubim. All these the doorway cherubim, the next veil cherubim, the holy place cherubim guarding the way, all the way back to Eden. But the cherubim in Eden had a flaming sword, an instrument of death, and it was flaming. That's a divine judgment by which nobody could pass through, symbolizing that man cannot get through again. It's a divine judgment against him. But on Yom Kippur, the high priest passed through because of one thing: he had blood. And the blood, it's like on Passover, counted as his own death. That was, when he put his hand on the sacrifice, that sacrifice was like him, and it was dying for him and Israel. So when he went through to the cherubim, he went to the veil, he could pass through because that blood counted as if he was gone, as if his life was judged already, as if Israel was judged, so he could get through. He's already gone. The high priest signified his death as he went through, foreshadowing something. That one day, because I'm saying all the high priests were a shadow of Messiah, that one day the high priest, the true high priest, would actually pass through into the gates, pass through judgment, not with a sacrifice, but with his own blood, his own death. Then Yom Kippur has come. What was the sword of the cherubim on Yom Kippur? It was God's judgment against sin. It was God's judgment that you could not go in there without getting killed if you didn't have that blood. It was the law I shared on Friday, the tablets in the arks condemning man's sin, which was given on Mount Horeb, which means in Hebrew the sword. From the same word used of the cherubim, it convicts of sin. Now on the day of redemption of Messiah, sin's going to be ended. There's got to be a sword on that day because you got to get through the cherubim. What is it? Well, first it's the law. The law, judgment. They used the law to judge Messiah. Messiah was put to death through the law, the sword of God. But also, the word Herev used of the cherubim, the word Herev, also, the sword of the cherubim also can mean, not just a sword, it also means any sharp implement. It can mean a spear. It can mean nails. Ultimately, the flaming sword was the judgment of God coming on Messiah through the spear, through the nails, the judgment of God. The sacrifice